to our peoples. For all those affected by this discovery, a National Indian Residential School crisis line is available to provide support, 1-866-925-4419. In BC, a toll-free First Nations and Indigenous crisis line is available, 1-800-588-8717. Both crisis lines are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you. So I think in following on that statement from the Squamish Nation, I just want to take a minute of silence to remember these lives lost. Thank you, everyone. The District of Squamish is deeply committed to the work Truth and Reconciliation, implementing the principles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and implementing the calls to action. This work has been the focus of this council. It started with the last council, and it will continue for many councils. But I want to follow the lead of our colleagues at Squamish Nation to say today is a good day to recommit to the work that we still need to do. And we've come a long way in rebuilding and redefining and recommitting to a different relationship with Squamish Nation. I think that's really important. And we will continue to educate ourselves and our staff on the history of colonialism. We'll continue to seek ways to implement principles outlined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And I think find new ways to move forward to the benefit of the people that are with us today, but also future generations, side by side with the nation, and to be good stewards socially, economically, environmentally of this beautiful valley. So I want to let people know that the library has made resources available to the public if they would like to learn more, and certainly learning more about the history and acknowledging this hard past. The past is the first step. And so if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to visit the library and access some of those resources that are there. And certainly there's some beautiful videos that the nation has put out over the last few days. You can visit their Facebook page to watch those. There's songs, there's videos, and yeah, just would encourage people in our community to respect the 215 hours of remembrance for these children. And I'll open up the floor. Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to start by sharing a quote from Chief Joe Mathias, speaking about his ancestors. They can never be silenced, but echo through the universe for all time. This is how I think of the 215 children discovered buried at the former residential school in Kamloops. The discovery is getting us more present than ever to the systemic racism that they faced. And while we've come a long way in recognizing the inequity in many of our systems, to this day, there's still a great deal of work to be done. As me, in my home, at the traditional village site known to the Squamish people as Siatchum, protected by my white privilege. The impact the discovery of this historical atrocity has had on my First Nations friends is significant. It brought back tortured memories of parents and grandparents, recalling the painful injustice suffered at the hands of people who didn't love and care for the students that they were tasked with educating. These days ahead are days for all of us to reflect on what we can do, the difference that we can make, and our own reconciliation steps. Today I wear orange. Tomorrow and every day, I will search for an opportunity, no matter how small, to strip away the inequity First Nations people experience now and on a daily basis. Every child matters, every day. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Better understanding of our shared history is important. The Kamloops story touches the Squamish Nation community more than as just another tragic residential school story. The Kamloops Diocese of the Catholic Church had a lot of influence in this corridor from Lillooet on down. Local children were sent to their schools at Lytton, Kamloops, and of course St. Paul's in North Vancouver. A local school was built here in Squamish on Wilson Crescent in 1910. The building still exists today. It was not a residential school. It was never used. Instead, the residential school solution was implemented by the authorities in the assumptions of the day. This was a tragic failure. I've had opportunity to visit the former Kamloops residential school building several times, and I do encourage a visit. It's a most impressive complex hosting the Secwepemc Tribal Council and the Kamloops Secwepemc Tribal Council or local administration. And it's a very impressive and busy complex. It has been long since taken over by the local community, and it includes a museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Race.
Thank you. My heart goes out to the parents, the relatives, and the several First Nations who are affected by this. I can only barely imagine the pain you are suffering. It is, for me, and I think many others, unfortunately, not completely surprising. I think we've all known for many years from media and other reports, personal reports, of problems with the residential school system. We can look back at those schools and we can hold those responsible, the federal government, in this case, the Roman Catholic Church, but I think other churches were in charge of other schools. In history, I think we'll judge them for what they did or what they neglected to do. I think I prefer to try to look forward. I think there's two things for me that stand out. One is, as the mayor mentioned, the passage of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which is presently working its way through our parliament. That I was reading coincidentally this morning in the Vancouver Sun, is presently stalled on the floor of the Senate. And I think the only thing I can say is, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, let's get on it. I think the other is it's going to be very important going forward that Canada and First Nations and Canadian society generally has a thorough understanding of what happened at these schools and what is there. This is not going to be a story with a happy ending. It will not be pleasant, but it is part of our history, and it is important, I think, as Canadians that we understand it completely. I had a professor in university tell me that one of the reasons that we study history is so that we can avoid making the same mistakes that people who came before us did. I think that applies here. I can only hope going forward that we make better decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I echo many of the sentiments of my colleagues and appreciate the time to reflect on the tragedy that came to light last week. I continue to struggle with wrapping my head around what it truly means in that we knew that this was very much a likelihood based off of the brave history and stories that those who have survived residential schools have been able to share with us. But the reality of the discovery definitely brings it very close to home. And knowing that this is one of multiple sites is even more heartbreaking. And I would like to suggest in a form of a motion that this council does write to the federal government and call for urgent action on, in particular, action number 75 of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, and expedited implementation of all recommendations, so that we can see some advancement, not just in statement, but also in action from that level of government.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner. Councillor Pangio?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I have a few thoughts. The one, there's been over the last few years a number of opportunities with Squamish elders who have gone to residential school where they've shared their experiences, and every time you can see how much that has impacted them, and the remembering is very challenging, and they selflessly shared that with our community over and over again because they knew the importance of making us understand so that we would take appropriate action. And so just seeing this story come to light, I can't help but think about how this is surfacing a lot of emotions for these people and a lot of unpleasant, to say the least, memories. And so my heart really goes out to everyone who is struggling right now and who has, though over and over again, faced those struggles, not just for themselves, but for the benefit of the whole community. One of the other things I've been thinking about is I watched the video of Adam Olson, MLA, his speech in the legislature, and it was very powerful, and it made me think back. I was there when he was sworn into the legislature a few years ago, and he was brought in with some of the members of his nation in full regalia, and it was a very moving moment, but very strange because you had the contrast of Indigenous leadership entering the hall in full regalia, being installed as a leadership, but also this overbearing colonial symbolism everywhere. And I think it really does reflect where we are seeing Indigenous peoples regain their place in this land, but there's still this overbearing constitutional framework just kind of looming over all of us, and so that is our task to change that. The final thing I want to mention is I watched some of the videos from Squamish Nation about the ceremonies at St. Paul, and it's on Facebook, and you really need to go and watch it. I think the music, the speeches, the community, the language, all of it was incredibly moving, but also inspiring. And you see that resilience and strength in the face of the tragedy, which, tells me sometimes as a settler leader, I feel I have to be able to do more, but I'm not doing enough. Watching those ceremonies, though, there I saw strength and the ability to get things done no matter what, and I found that very inspiring in all of this. So that's something that I'm going to be holding onto out of this, and with that, I just my heart is with everyone who is struggling with this news, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pangio. Councillor Hurford.
Thank you. As this came to light over the past days, as a parent, I can't even begin to fathom the effects this has on the families of these children, and not just their parents, but their grandparents and their aunties and uncles and cousins. And it struck me as something that we would read about an atrocity that happened, hundreds of years ago or something in the very distant past, and we'd take learnings from that to make sure that we don't repeat it. This is such recent history. And we know on some levels we know what to do to help move the conversation, move the society forward, and it has been outlined in the Truth and Reconciliation. Um, the recommendations, the 94 calls to action, are a good place to start. And I'm sure when we're done with those, when those 94 are accomplished, there's going to be more to do. So I agree. We need to continue to urge the senior levels of government to move those pieces forward. And then as we go about our days here as settler leaders, continue to work to find ways, in our own ways, in our own little ways, to help the process forward. So my heart goes out to the families, and the composure we've seen from the various nations involved is just unbelievable in the face of such tragedy, and their strength is noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner, I want to come back to you.
Yeah, I would like to move that we write a letter to the Premier, sorry, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Bennett, the Premier, and Minister Rankin, calling for urgent action on Action 75 of the Truth and Reconciliation Report.
Seconded by Councillor French. Thank you for bringing the motion forward. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. I raise my hands to members of Squamish Nation and all Indigenous people for their leadership. And thank my colleagues for your comments tonight. So I think it is more fitting to take a 5-minute recess before we jump into business. So we'll come back at 6:25. Thank you. We are back in our special business meeting. We're on item 2, adoption of the agenda. That's moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 3 is Ministerial Order M192. The district, due to public health orders and not having people attend in person, the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting. Through the following means. The meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. The meeting is open to the public for electronic participation via WebEx. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are meeting electronically, so any member of council that disconnects or reconnects to the meeting should let me know so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Council members can identify themselves when they wish to speak by simply raising their hand. If they're connected by video, if by audio, just say chair. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state when they vote. No statements required if the member's in favor. We do ask everyone participating this evening to keep their telephone or computer on mute until it is their turn to speak. Council members will be involved in and participate in the meeting. If you're having technical difficulties, please text the corporate officer. If the technical difficulty is on our side, we will recess for up to 10 minutes to get it fixed and have everyone reconnect again. So with that, council, any notice of motion? Seeing none. We don't have any delegations or proclamations this evening. Consideration of any unscheduled public attendance. So people can raise their hand in WebEx. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We do have one timed item this evening. It is the temporary use permit number 70, Southwood Holdings. And I will turn it over to staff for presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vrish Prahalad, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Tonight, I will be presenting a temporary use permit for the properties located at 37760, 37768, 37776 Second Ave, which I'll be referring to as Southwood Holdings throughout the presentation, to allow for personal service establishments at these properties. Southwood Holdings is located at 37760, 37768, 37776 Second Ave. The building contains one private residence on the third floor, a storage facility, several office/retail spaces on the first and second floors, and an alcoholic beverage manufacturing facility at the back of the building. The property is zoned light industrial I1 and allows for an array of light industrial uses and some commercial uses such as restaurants and gyms. The OCP land use designation for this area is mixed employment. The property adjacent is CD6 Specialized Business Service Center, a zone that is also intended to accommodate a mix of light industrial, art studios, and restaurant uses. The property is also near the MUD 2 zone that accommodates a mix of light industrial and residential. The temporary use permit application for council's consideration this evening is a proposal to permit Southwood Holdings to allow personal service establishments for a period of 3 years. There are currently several uses in the Southwood Holdings property that do not comply with the permitted zoning uses, including the tattoo parlor, jewelry store, and counseling center. The TUP, if approved, would allow for the new personal service establishments to occupy the property. Allowing the TUP for the entire property will prevent each individual tenant from seeking a TUP for their unpermitted uses. Staff are planning to review the overall zoning approach for the area in the next 3 years with the aim of developing zoning that is better aligned with the OCP policies for the area and the district's employment space needs. Staff are supportive of the 3-year TUP to allow Southwood Holdings to maintain the current and allow for new personal service establishment businesses as an interim measure while the overall zoning for downtown South is under review. There are currently 21 parking stalls, including 1 designated spot, 12 fronting Second Ave and 9 in the laneway. Southwood Holdings will not require more parking spaces with the addition of personal service establishments to the building. The project was posted to the district's development showcase and a development sign was installed on the property. Statutory requirements for public notifications with respect to the TUP were completed in accordance with the Local Government Act. They include notices of the TUP consideration date mailed and hand-delivered to owners and occupants within 100 meters of the property. A TUP ad in the Chief on May 27th. We currently have received no public comments at this point. This TUP application is in line with a number of OCP policies. 13.2A, to concentrate commercial development that serves the day-to-day needs of Squamish residents in the downtown area. 16.2A, to encourage the development of pedestrian-oriented retail, tourist-oriented retail, and day-to-day commercial services in the downtown area. And 16.2G, to encourage development of commercial space on the first and second stories in the downtown area. Staff's recommendation is to approve the issuance of the TUP 70 to permit the use of personal service establishments at the Southwood Holdings property, and that it be executed for a period of 3 years. Alternatively, council could not authorize TUP 70 and refer it back to staff. That is the end of my presentation. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Pahawan. Council? Questions? Now I can see you. Council Reyes?
Thank you. Just through the staff, there's actually, I think, 3 separate parcels of land and 3 separate buildings. In the picture that I've got in my computer, you can see spaces between them. And I'm wondering, first of all, whether these offending uses are in 1 or 2 or all 3 buildings. And secondly, do we know how long they've been there?
Through you, Mayor. I believe it's like just the first 2, 37776 and 37768 are where most of the offending businesses are in. The 3rd building is where an engineering firm, Flipside Burger and Decider manufacturing is. So those all comply with the zoning. So it's just the first 2 buildings. And as for how long that they've been in there, I can't really speak to how long those particular uses have been in the building without proper licensing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You, other questions? Councilor Stoner?
In line with that, when staff were reviewing the TUP application, was there consideration of just providing it for a few of the sites as opposed to all 3? And do we risk increasing the amount of personal service establishment across the 3 buildings? And really what we're looking for is light industrial space.
Through you, Mayor, at the moment, we wanted to blanket all 3 buildings with the TUP so that each individual establishment didn't have to seek their own TUP. And for right now, it's only going to be for 3 years.
Mr. Valenzuela?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just to add to what Rich said, the OCP designation here is mixed employment, which would be supportive of some personal service establishments as well. So we didn't see an issue with allowing it on all. There's 2 parcels actually here. There's 3 addresses, but only 2 parcels.
Thank you. Councilor French?
Thanks, Chair. So I'm wondering if there's anything that wasn't included in the staff report and presentation about what prompted the temporary use permit request. Like, have there been complaints of a lack of parking, and is there an identified parking shortage here?
Through you, Mayor, we have received application for a business license for a registered massage therapist that wanted to go into the building. That didn't meet the zoning, and that's kind of what spurred this whole thing.
Okay, and so just further to that, based on your previous answer, I'm thinking probably the answer is no, but I'll ask anyway. Is there someone or some people unhappy that the spaces are being used contrary to the current zoning, and complaints were filed from that as a motivation?
We haven't received any negative comments as far as residents in the area about the uses currently in the buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So the public does have an opportunity to speak. I'll go to you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, and maybe Mr. Belanicius can help us. You know, there's 3 years, within 3 years, staff expect to take a look at the zoning down there. I take it, would that be to bring it more in line with the OCP? Would that be the goal of that?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. We've always, for a while now, have been planning to do a project focused on downtown south zoning. And we've made, I think, some progress with the mixed use districts that have been implemented in that area. And so the zoning is probably going to build on that experience. But it is to align with the OCP designation, which supports local services, light industrial, as well as residential. So essentially mixed use projects in this area.
So if I might continue, so one of the alternatives, I mean, we can go for 0, 1, 2, or 3 years with this application. And the other thing we can do is, if we say no, is basically just encourage them to rezone now to legitimize what they're doing there. Is there a pro or a negative to that?
Through you, Mayor. So from a staff perspective, we thought it was appropriate to accept the temporary use permit application because this is an area in transition zoning wise. And that usually means that temporary use permits are an appropriate way to deal with those interim uses. But yes, if council denied the temporary use permit today, then the applicants would still have an option to apply for a rezoning, which is a bit more of a involved process for the district.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Prahala, there's no extension on this TUP contemplated. It's just 3 years.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay, so the public does have an opportunity to speak, so I have a statement to read. And our moderator will put up the instructions on the screen. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the requested temporary use permit to permit the use of personal service establishments at Southwood Holdings at 37760, 37768, 37776 2nd Avenue for 3 years, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute temporary use permit number 70 for 3 years from the date of issuance. Details to participate via telephone or the WebEx platform are displayed on the screen for those who have logged in from their computer or are watching the live stream of the meeting and are included on the district website. In order to get on the speakers list, please raise your hand, so to speak, via the telephone by dialing *3 or via WebEx by opening the participant panel and by clicking on the hand icon. Please note that there will be a moderator who will communicate with speakers. When it is your turn to speak, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or dialog box if you're on WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the chat function in WebEx to send the host a message, or you can email your comments to hearing@squamish.ca. Email correspondence received during this proceeding will be provided to council and will be uploaded to the agenda package on. We'll just give folks a moment to decide whether they'd like to speak to this. Again, it's *3 on your telephone or raise your hand in the participant panel on WebEx. No one is popping up on our screen to speak. I will go back to council just to see if there's any last comments or questions. Not comments, questions. Councilor Pettengill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering, it's hopefully it's not too much of a tangent, but we delegated some authority for TUPs. And in my mind, the size of the commercial enterprise could be fairly large. I'm just wondering if staff could comment on the relationship in size between this and then where the delegated authority line is.
Through you, Mayor. I can't remember off the top of my head what the exact number was, but the building is, like the total of the 3 buildings is way too large for this to be delegated.
Okay, thank you.
No hands up. I'm not seeing any further hands from council, and we don't have any hands on WebEx or on the phone. So the staff recommendation is to issue the temporary use permit for personal service establishments for a period of 3 years. Councilor Herford, you're moving that. Seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Any comments? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. I think this is an appropriate use of a temporary use permit with the capital T with the 3-year term and without a renewal provision gives a timeline to address this in a more fulsome way on at a later date that's defined. So I'm happy to support this, and I think it's a great use of a temporary use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further comments? Councilor Pettengill? Then Councilor Rice?
Yes, thank you. I think this does make sense given our OCP and the direction we're heading. The one thing that popped out at me for the future in terms of pedestrian-friendly businesses and that sort of thing, I think there is some work that needs to be done on the walkability in this area, and so I hope that's well considered, and I'm sure it will be when we do the actual rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rice?
Thank you. So my understanding is that the decision on a renewal would be made 3 years from now. There's nothing we're doing tonight that dictates that decision one way or the other. So I have to say it's a bit aggravating that this situation has arisen at all, but I'm trying to put that out of my mind. My experience with temporary use permits is that, you know, they're very appropriate when there's some kind of a fixed time period. And we've had them in the past for display homes and things like that, where they're marketing the development. And so that's just basically a fixed use. It's a temporary use. It's not a long-term use. Here, the difficulty for me is that these are long-term businesses. Potentially, they'll go on indefinitely. And we're putting in effect, temporary zoning in place now. What that has led to sometimes in my experience here and in other boards is sometimes at the end of the 6-year period, there is no renewal. That is the statutory limit. And you end up in a panic rezoning. Really, the rezoning should have started long before that. So I think landowners should be encouraged to legitimize their offending uses sooner rather than take advantage of this. The only thing that sways my mind is staff's indication that within that 3-year period, there will be a review of the zoning generally, which may or may not correct this problem. And if it doesn't, and then at the end of 3 years, those businesses would have to move anyway to comply with whatever the zoning might be. But if it does, then that's fine, and it can carry on as properly zoned property. But I don't think, for me personally, apart from that, this is not the kind of TUP I would have supported. I'd have just suggested that they go off and start the rezoning process now rather than later. However, I will support this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, yes, Councilor French.
Thank you. The uses that currently aren't permitted under the existing zoning feel totally appropriate for me in this area. So I think legitimizing the uses while a broader zoning review is underway seems like a logical step at this point. So I support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with my colleague. I would not normally have supported a TUP like this to legitimize the use. But given that we are doing a broader zoning review, then I think this is an appropriate use of time and create some certainty for those businesses while their future is determined through a broader engagement process around the downtown south area. But without that, this isn't really, this looks to me like something that should be rezoned, not put under a TUP. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're on to item 9, bylaws. So first up is first 3 readings for the District of Squamish Demolition Waste Diversion Bylaw number 2813, 2021. I believe Mr. Wint is joining us.
Hello, I'm just sharing my screen. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and guests. My name is Jeff Wint, and I'm the Sustainability Coordinator. So I am here today to talk to you a little bit about demolition waste. The purpose of the presentation is to provide some background on demolition waste in the district, as well as the guiding policies and strategies that we have. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the proposed demolition waste diversion bylaw. So to start with, there's 3 strategies and policies that are really guiding this. So the zero waste strategy, it directs us to institute construction and demolition waste diversion guidelines. The Community Climate Action Plan, Big Move 1, close the loop on waste. It directs us to develop recycling targets as part of the construction and demolition permitting process. There's another action item in there to encourage circular economy as well, that this speaks to a little bit. And then Council's strategic plan. It has a goal of increasing the diversion rate up to 80% and to reduce the per capita waste to landfill to 300 kilograms per person. And the proposed bylaw will address all of this. So we want to start here today by looking a little bit at the waste composition of the construction and demolition waste. Of the waste being generated, or of the waste going into the Squamish landfill, about 12 to 23% of that is construction or demolition waste. We have that slight discrepancy because of the mixed waste category, which is any waste that contains more than 5% recyclables. Some of that is going to be construction or demolition waste, whereas some of it is other waste as well. But what we do see in that construction waste that we have, and this is from our 2020 waste composition report, is that a lot of that is wood waste. That 41% on the graph is actually wood waste. That wood waste is costing contractors a lot to put into our landfill because of our tipping fees that were adjusted in January. There's better use of that wood through reuse or through recycling. And it's taking up a lot of space in our landfill. And once it's in that landfill, it is producing methane once it's in there. When we look a little bit more into demolition waste, we see that high rates of diversion are possible. So this is an example taken from a study that the Vancouver Economic Commission had done with a Metro Vancouver-based deconstruction company. And what this shows us is that diversion of about 95% is possible through most demolitions. We see a little bit of variance based on the composition in the building, but we're able to go from the high 80s up to the high 90s in diversion. If we look a little bit closer to home, the recent demolition of the Valley Cliff Fire Hall, the contractor there was able to achieve a very high rate of diversion. So if we look at that by weight, they were able to achieve almost a 97% diversion. And if we're looking at it by volume, they were able to achieve a 93% diversion. While this composition isn't representative of a single family dwelling demolition of the high amount of concrete, it does show that all this diversion is possible with the disposal options that we have here in Squamish. And it was also a nice test case to prove how much can be saved through diversion. Through this, they would have saved about $35,000 versus putting it all in the landfill under that mixed waste tipping fee. When we look at demolition, there's kind of three methods that are happening currently here in Squamish. There's the traditional demolition, where contractors are trying to get the house and material off the site as quick as possible. We have green demolition, which again is really focused on speed while trying to recycle as much as possible, but not salvage anything. And then we have deconstruction, where material or where the houses or buildings are actually being taken apart piece by piece, with the goal to keep as much of that material in a usable state as possible. And those three different methods of demolition, they kind of mirror our waste hierarchy, with deconstruction up at the top and traditional demolition and landfilling right down at the bottom. When we're looking at this bylaw, we've decided to just address demolition waste. And there's a couple of reasons for it. The first is that it's a very high waste process that happens in a very short period of time. With that traditional demolition process, a whole house can be removed from a site in a day or 2 days, which makes it very difficult to address with our normal outreach activities. With ongoing construction sites and new construction sites, we're able to visit them a number of times and remind them and get them working up to the way that we want them to be diverting. With demolition, they don't really have that time to fix their practices. The other thing is we know that there's a lot of value in that waste that's generated from demolition, particularly the wood. Right now, we know that the cost of wood has increased quite a bit. So there's a lot of value in the wood, the appliances, and the fixtures that are in demolition. So being able to generate that value is really important to demolition, and we don't necessarily have that same value in new construction waste because of the packaging and other things that are in there. So if we look at the proposed demolition waste diversion bylaw, the way that it'll work is applicants for a demolition permit will pay a $20 per square meter refundable fee along with their application fee. That comes out to about $1.85 per square foot. Once they've completed their demolition, the permit holder will submit a diversion report back to me along with scale tickets. And we have a diversion report template for contractors or permit holders to use, where they'll just be having to put in their diversion and their landfill, and all the calculations will be done automatically for them. If they're able to achieve higher than 80% diversion by volume, they'll get 100% of their refundable fee returned. And if they achieve less than 40% diversion, then no fee will be returned. If they achieve somewhere between that 80 and 40%, there's a sliding scale based on their diversion. And for most jobs, if they're able to divert the concrete, the wood, the metal, and the drywall, they'll be exceeding 80% by volume. Two particular aspects of our bylaw that are a little bit different from some of the other demolition waste bylaws around are about reuse and about volume. So in particular with reuse, we're overvaluing it compared to recycling. And that's to encourage people to move up the waste hierarchy. So 1 ton of reused material, of reused wood, is going to be worth 2 tons of material diverted. The other thing we're doing that's a little bit different is we're calculating the diversion rate by volume instead of by mass. The reasons for this, one is because it reflects the impact on our landfill. And the second is to incentivize the diversion of some of those lighter materials. As we saw from that fire hall demolition in Valley Cliff, the concrete and the asphalt really take up a lot of that weight. So when we look at it by volume, it encourages the contractors to divert some of that lighter material like wood or even wood, metal, drywall, things like that. So some of the intended outcomes of our proposed bylaw, less waste, less demolition waste headed to the landfill is really the main intended outcome. We also want to encourage the reuse of wood and circular economy. As I said, right now is a really good time for us to be encouraging contractors to look at the reuse of wood because of that high cost of wood. It's also going to allow us to collect some data, including average diversion and deconstruction rates of these jobs, as well as some accurate tonnage from the demolition projects that happen in Squamish. And all of this data and working with the contractors through this bylaw are going to give us a lot of valuable information on how we can address some of the broader construction waste trends, and if this sort of approach is going to be effective for new construction waste and renovation waste. So thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Wint.
I'll stop sharing.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have two questions to kick off. The first is, how did we determine the floor for the diversion rate? So why 40%, not 50% or higher?
Through the chair, the 40% represents what we can see through a lot of concrete diversion. What we find by normal practice is the concrete is diverted through most demolition jobs. The cost of putting concrete in the landfill is prohibitive for anyone to do it when there's significantly cheaper options. So that 40%, if you're below that, you haven't even diverted your concrete. So that's kind of why we came up with that.
So just to follow up on that a little bit, if there's already incentive to kind of do that bare minimum of concrete, is there the option to push that kind of floor up to 50% to encourage better than normative practice?
There is an option to do that. Once people are starting to do drywall and wood waste, they're going to be quite a bit higher than that 50%. What we've kind of seen just anecdotally talking to contractors is they're either doing kind of bare minimum or they're doing quite a bit. The expectation is most contractors, if they're trying to do that diversion, are going to be up towards that 70, 80, 90% range.
Okay. That leads in well to my other question, which is around drywall. And I was a bit confused reading the bylaw as to whether it was included in the diversion rate or if it's hazardous waste and hence not included. So 4.3 in the bylaw says all gypsum, drywall, and other hazardous waste must be handled strictly in accordance with applicable regulations. Hazardous waste is not included in the diversion rate.
Yeah, so we will be including drywall. Sorry, it is included in, sorry, through the chair. Drywall is included in that diversion rate. We know that there is some regulation around drywall already through WorkSafe BC, as well as through what's accepted in our landfill. But what we really want to avoid is people trying to bury drywall in with other waste. So we will be including the drywall in diversion.
Good, Councillor Stoner. Okay, Councillor Fringe.
Thank you. So, warning, I'm about to go deep into the weeds of the wording of the bylaw. So in section 4.1 of the bylaw, D and E make reference back up to A1, which reads, A, causes at least 50% of divertible material as calculated by volume being removed from the site. 1, to be removed or to a recycling facility or a composting facility as applicable, or, so by my reading, this leaves off the option of reusing the building materials as part of the effort to divert 80% of the material from landfill. So I'm wondering if it would make better sense to reference back to A1 and 2 in this particular part of the bylaw.
Through the chair, yes, the or there is to, at the end of 4.1A1, is to include the to be reused as building material in the clause. But for clarity, it could be altered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pettengill.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering, in terms of compliance with the bylaw, but also understanding the effectiveness for our purposes, are we planning on-site audits and or spot audits at the landfill? Or can you speak a bit to that?
Through the chair, we are currently doing audits of all construction sites through myself and a bylaw officer visiting the sites, looking in bins, speaking to the site supervisors, as well as workers on the site to talk about waste diversion. We do also have photos of mixed waste coming to us from our landfill, so that we can see when mixed material is going in there. One of the challenges with demolition, and particularly that traditional demolition where large equipment is brought to a site, a house is picked up, dropped in a bin, and taken to the landfill right away, is it's very difficult to get to them through spot audits, because they can be on and off the site in a matter of hours or a day or two. This bylaw is intended to get us a little bit ahead of that, so that we're not trying to audit them on the particular day that they're doing that demolition, but rather having them plan ahead of time on how the waste from that demolition can be diverted.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, is happy to see that the incentive seems significant, and the penalty for trying to game the system in terms of not doing the diversion you say you're doing is significant. But I wasn't clear on the penalty if I just don't bother getting a demolition permit. Are those fines aligned so that really your best, cheapest option is to get a permit and to do it properly? And just in the back of my mind is sometimes we get emails about waste off in the, off a back road, and there's an implication that sometimes it's construction waste. So making sure that people aren't circumventing this, and that all of our fines are aligned.
Yeah, through the chair. So the bylaw, as you point out, is really only effective when people are applying for permits, which is required to do any demolition within the District of Squamish. So the existing enforcement and penalty for not applying for permits would still be in effect.
Okay, thank you. And do we know, are the fines aligned with the fines within this bylaw?
Through the chair, sorry.
So for example, if it's only $100 fine for not getting a demolition permit, and I didn't care about the environment, that might be my route. So I'm just sort of wanting to make sure. I mean, I think I really like this bylaw, want to make sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's in terms of other fines.
Through the chair, the bylaw doesn't address people who aren't getting permits. Yeah, if you don't get a permit, knock down a house, dump that material in the woods, this bylaw won't penalize you for that. But there are other bylaws, that do speak to getting permits and illegal dumping that you would be subject to.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Wint. Mayor Elliott, is my sound okay? I'm working with some clumsy arrangements here.
No, it's fine. It was a bit echoey, but you're all right now.
Thank you. Mr. Wint, I appreciated the clarifications you've made as to the rationale for proceeding with demolition only rather than with construction, new construction renovation. And this though, you do intend to address this in the near future, I understand. The rest of the region will be looking at us. And my question to you is, how and through what channels will our current Squamish bylaw initiative and experience be shared with the other local corridor governments? Because of course, our contractors, our industry, our facilities to handle recycling are all shared. And so there should be great interest.
Through the chair, there is great interest from the resort municipality of Whistler, as well as the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District on this bylaw. Construction and demolition waste is definitely a hot topic when waste coordinators are speaking. I believe the City of Victoria recently had a bylaw or a direction to staff to look at deconstruction. The City of Burnaby is looking at this. So it's not only within our regional district that people are looking at this, but across Metro Vancouver and across the province. As far as our regional district, we are in regular communication with Whistler and the SRRD about this this bylaw and about construction waste in general, because there are a lot of contractors that do work up and down the corridor. What's most effective with them is our tipping fees. This bylaw really just looks at people who need to come to us for permits. So a building in Britannia Beach doesn't need a permit from the District of Squamish. They are, of course, if they're going to bring material to our landfill, subject to those same tipping fees. So if they bring us a mixed load, they'll be paying the $4.50 per metric ton, rather than if they're separating it, the $105 for clean wood, the $150 for dirty wood, and the $200 for what we would call clean construction waste.
Thank you very much.
That was an echoey ending. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. Just following on Councillor Pettingill's line of questioning, a brief scan of the fees and charges bylaw actually doesn't include a fee if somebody deconstructs a building without a deconstruction permit. We have a fee for work in advance of a building permit issuance. So I am just curious if staff know of a charge that we have in our fees and charges bylaw for deconstructing a building without a deconstruction permit.
Mr. Valniscus?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And in the background, I was also checking. We do have a charge, a ticketing charge for demolishing a building without a demolition permit. And I suspect it's not as aligned with the latest charges. I think it's only $300. Now, in some cases, we would also, if we we're dealing with a case where the demolition was occurring, we would make them apply for a permit after that fine was issued, and so they would have to go through that process as well. But it's likely that there could be cases where we got there after the fact. So I think we are planning to do a review of the building bylaw later this year. And we could look at making sure that those charges in cases where, we're getting after the fact are aligned with the likely charges under this new demolition bylaw.
And is that a problem in our district, people demolishing things without a permit?
It's kind of a persistent thing. It's not, I wouldn't classify it as a huge problem, but it does happen.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Wynn, in reading the report, it seems like the way we construct buildings or the materials we're using don't always lend themselves to recycling. So is there talk amongst municipalities and regional districts about trying to get the province to move in a different direction with building code or standardizing that makes it easier to create this circular economy?
Through the chair, this is a real topic that does come up. There's ideas such as material passports for buildings or buildings as material banks to facilitate the deconstruction process. And there is areas of houses, once spray foam was introduced, that are more difficult to do a recycling or a green demolition or a deconstruction job with. So it is something that different groups are looking at. In particular, the National Zero Waste Council's C&D Waste Working Group is looking at it. And hopefully, there's some guidance on how that should be moving forward in the future.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right. So the staff recommendation is to give this bylaw first 3 readings. Councilor French, you brought up something that you might want clarity on. Mr. Wickham, you're not part of council. Did you want to say something before we put a motion on?
Yes, please. Sorry to interrupt. Councillor Stoner started off with an excellent question on 4.3, getting down to the nitty gritty on definitions of hazardous waste, etc. It was very perceptive. Staff have been beavering away in the background, reviewing and debating over Teams. I think we need to make a small fix to section 4.3. So we would like to propose a fix of language by motion. It would be last sentence of section 4.3 would read, hazardous waste other than gypsum and drywall is not included in the diversion rate.
Did you catch that? Can you follow? Can you repeat that, Mr. Wickham?
Hazardous waste other than gypsum and drywall is not included in the diversion rate.
Okay, we've captured that. Mr. Wickham and Mr. Wynn, I think Councillor French wanted to add reference to 4A1 and 2, 4.1A1 and 2 in sections D and E, was it, Councillor French? See your hand, Councillor Stoner. Is that, maybe you can reflect on that, Councillor Stoner?
I was going to propose that sections D and E just reference section 4.1A as a whole.
That works.
Does that work for staff?
Yes.
So it includes both 1 and 2. Okay. Councillor French, or Councillor Stoner, did you have another amendment? No. Councillor French, did you want to move that with the 2 amendments?
Yes, please.
Seconded by Councillor Herford. Comments? Councillor Stoner and Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am very excited to see this bylaw come forward. I too was hoping that it was going to address both demolition and construction waste at the same time, but appreciate staff's rationale for taking a stepwise approach here and learning as we go. I think that this is a strong bylaw as written. And it will hopefully help us get closer to the ambitious target that we have of 80% reduction. If over time we are able to increase that floor from 40% and go a bit higher, I will also be excited to do that in due course, but happy to try this for a little bit and see how it goes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. This is a solid bylaw proposal from staff, and it's accompanied by a very useful report. I'd like, however, to make a few observations mainly on the report. First of all, regarding the section when to deconstruct and when to demolish. And I think it's clear this is going to be an ongoing issue with lots to learn for everybody. On page 8 of the report, it says that deconstruction versus demolition is typically seen to be performed on older buildings to harvest the old wood from the structure. I suggest this is not a reliable rule of thumb. There is on the following page a reference to lower quality wood in newer homes with, quote, dimensional lumber being wood that is fast growing like pine or spruce. There's also reference to finger jointing and glulam beams. None of these assumptions are true for the Canadian home construction. And I suggest they're not so relevant for our local circumstances of this circumstance around our bylaw initiative. In recent last couple of years, several 1990s homes have been deconstructed, yielding #1 clear spruce 2x10s and 2x4 SPF and 2x6s, glulam beams. There's a ready market for all of it. Our assumptions and guidelines for lumber recovery from deconstructed homes needs to be informed by contractors in the market, and they are going to work on grades and grade stamps. Secondly, with respect to heritage buildings with valuable wood components, there are 4 heritage buildings, larger commercial type buildings, scheduled to come down soon, within the next few months, up to the next few years. A local community group has been seeking to salvage heritage wood components from one of these buildings for about the last decade. There may be finally light at the end of the tunnel, I understand, but there's been no district policy support to give direction to the owner developers. Hopefully we have some tools here, but I do hope this might also be addressed in other initiatives coming down the pipe in future. With respect to the infrastructure and planning and work practices that will be a part of the new world here, this is likely going to be a steep learning curve for many developers and contractors. For the district, we need to consider the infrastructure needs posed by a deconstruction and materials recycling sector in our land use planning and permitting. The Chikai Fan is pretty much the only place to go. Are we ready? No permanent building spill will be required. Will the permitting process be more onerous than necessary? If we don't plan our medium industrial lands, we'll be bringing craneage companies up from Surrey. The harvested materials and employment benefits will go down to Surrey. This report in several places discusses these infrastructure issues and also with reference to Squamish Rebuild. So finally, the report highlights things that need attention in our next edition of the Community Climate Action Plan. And this has already been suggested in our conversation already. It could take an updated, more holistic view of green building with a balanced focus on building materials and embodied carbon and on building resiliency and recycling, in addition to the operational energy consumption. All we've really been focusing on so far is the operational energy consumption. Yet some of the efficiency solutions discussed at the table when we were putting together that plan last year are highlighted in this report as having potential to frustrate deconstruction and recycling, like spray foam insulation. So with those comments, I think this is a strong bylaw initiative and look forward to this being further developed in its application and as a learning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Pettengill, Hereford, and then French.
Thank you. Happy to support this bylaw. Very enthusiastic to see us putting less stuff in our landfill, and with staff's comment that we will be dealing with some of the related fines. I understand they're not part of this bylaw, but I think it's critical we address those and make sure those are aligned. So with that, happy to support this. Would appreciate staff's direction if they need a motion from council to make sure that that other work gets done. Otherwise, happy to let staff bring that back as part of the future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hereford.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this this bylaw. I think it's a great initiative, and there's plenty of learning to be had. And I look forward to the expansion into the construction, further into the construction sector, as deconstruction is just a portion. I really like this this direction. I appreciate staff's work on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thank you. This is a bylaw that I've been anticipating for a long time, and I'm happy that it's finally come in before us. I support the staff recommendation, and I'm looking forward to discussing more diversion initiatives in the future. Thanks.
Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question on the amended first 3 readings. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Wint.
Thank you.
We have to do readings for the accompanying fees and charges bylaw. This is amendment bylaw for demolition waste number 2822/2021. Begin first reading. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments on this one? Question? Any opposed? Mr. Velaniskis, do you want us to pass a motion as indicated by Councillor Pettengill about aligning those charges for future building bylaw?
Through you, Mayor, I've taken note of it. I don't think it's necessary. However, if council wishes to pass a motion, that would work too. But we've got a tracker for our building bylaw update going, so it's in the tracker.
Okay. So council, it's up to you. It's in the tracker, or you can put a motion in and it's on our. Okay, let's see it in. We'll move on. We're at 9B, adoption. One bylaw up for adoption tonight is the District of Squamish Floodplain Management Bylaw number 2751/2021. Council would have seen a response to the Squamish River Watershed Society about their concerns around parkades in our correspondence portion of the agenda. Someone who would like to move adoption. Moved by Council Race. I'll second that. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. How are you doing, council? Do you need another recess? Are you good? We're good? Okay. Keep going. We have a staff report. 10A1 is the province of BC's decision to end the BC Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, also known as CAREP. Mr. Pickett's put together a great letter for us, and he's here this evening.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Elliott. Can you see my slides on your screen?
Yeah.
You can?
Not yet.
Oh,
no.
Okay. Let me just redo that. Okay, I think we're ready to go now. Can you see them now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Ian Picketts. I'm the Manager of Sustainability and Climate Change here at the District of Squamish. So I'm here tonight to talk about the province of BC's decision to end the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, or CAREP. So I put together this RTC like literally hours within you delivering the motion that we bring a memo to the Committee of the Whole. Quite happy to see that that we were quite aligned in our thinking, but just to be upfront, this was not a memo made in response. It was just a good coincidence that these are very highly aligned, the objectives of both of these. So I trust that this report to council primarily addresses your request, and I'm glad that we're thinking similarly about this. I'm going to endeavor to keep this presentation short and leave time for discussion. So the CAREP is a grant program that's available to all communities in British Columbia that sign the Climate Action Charter. In signing the charter, communities commit to becoming carbon neutral in their corporate operations. They commit to measuring and reporting on their emissions, and they work toward complete, compact, and energy efficient communities. So this program is very broadly subscribed to, with 187 out of 190 local governments currently participating. Squamish signed the charter and has been participating and receiving funding since 2008. So Squamish has received a total of approximately $300,000 through this program and presently gets approximately $30,000 a year. So when we carbon neutral reserve was established, for the first number of years, all or most of the money went into this carbon neutral reserve, largely because there was not a staff person primarily dedicated toward climate action initiatives, and there was not a guiding climate action plan to help inform where this should go. Of note, 2020 was a big year of expenditures from the program, with over $60,000 being dedicated toward the creation and initial implementation of the CCAP plan. So currently the fund is at $148,000, and we are in conversation about how to allocate that money going forward. This conversation is of course highly affected by the distinct possibility that more money will not be coming into it. So when thinking about the impacts of the loss of this program, I have to really stress that it is it needs to be really thought of about communities throughout British Columbia, not just Squamish. We are in a relatively fortunate position that we established the carbon neutral reserve when starting to get this money. So it wasn't precisely allocated to certain ongoing programs that we have grown to depend on. It's this extra funding opportunity that, you know, there's of course a lot of demand for that money. However, thinking of other communities that don't have as many resources and don't have as much orientation toward climate action, this can be very crippling to local efforts to those communities. These are the communities that need it the most, and these are also the communities that have the least ability to go after and successfully get other funding that the government is claiming takes the place of this. So a couple of really big points about the impacts of the loss of this program. It's losing funding that is flexible. There's a whole range of activities that local governments need to take on. And there's often not a funding program available for a certain action, you know, something like topping up a rebate or a capital project or supporting a staff position. It's also a loss of funding that is reliable and ongoing. So you can use it for something like a staff position or a multi-year campaign. And finally, as I mentioned before, all of the other funding programs are highly competitive, and there are definitely winners and losers in those categories. Another big impact of the loss of this program is the loss of data. So CAREP provides a consistent reporting mechanism for BC communities, and the methods and results are publicly available. In the absence of CAREP, most communities will not report on emissions, and those that do are very likely to use varying methods. So therefore, the program represents a very important loss of data. And even if this gets picked back up in a couple of years, a couple-year hiatus in data is quite harmful to our ongoing climate action efforts. So just for your reference, here's an image from our GHG reporting software. With just a few clicks, I was able to get our natural gas consumption for the year 2020. So this is an extremely valuable resource to us that our senior energy specialist and facilities manager use quite a bit. I won't read it out, but please see the recommendation on the slide before you. Also, please feel absolutely open to using, copying, augmenting, or completely ignoring the letter template that we've created for Mayor Elliott. By all means, if you would like to draft your own letter, or if you would like us to take another stab at it, we are quite happy. Also, please refer to the alternative recommendations. So I will leave it at that, and I welcome your questions, comments, and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Piggott. You'll be happy to know we got an email from the District of Saanich. They have written a very similar letter and sent it out to all BC municipalities and the ministers. So we aren't the only ones recognizing that the loss of a flexible, ongoing, and non-competitive fund is critical to the work that allows for doing. Any questions for Mr. Piggott? No. I think this was obvious to all of us from the start. So thank you for the report. So the staff recommendations that I send correspondence to the Premier, Minister of Municipal Affairs, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and the Union of BC Municipalities regarding the decision to cancel. Moved by Councillor Stoner. Oh, you want to add to it?
I was going to add and CC all municipalities of the province.
Do you want to move that?
I will move that.
Seconder, Councillor Herford. Any comments? Councillor Anderson, then Stoner, then
Yes, I'd just like to point out that one feature of the draft letter before us I think is quite important, and that's the second to last sentence, giving the province an option, or to quote, to replace it with a similar, consistent, non-competitive program that is available to all municipalities. I think that's an important gesture, if you like, in the letter. We're all evolving on all levels of government, and maybe they've got something up their sleeve, and there certainly can be some new items in the toolbox in this general field. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner.
Just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Picketts for a very comprehensive report on this. And I do think that the letter itself, as structured, really outlines the issues that we originally had with the cancellation of the program. So I'm happy to support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I was very happy to see this, watching some of the conversation around Climate Caucus and hearing some of the smaller communities who've been really eager to figure out, they're working really hard to figure out how they can get involved in climate action. And the loss of this has been a real gut punch. So I think it's really important that we restore this, or something equivalent like Councillor Anderson says. The only suggestion I might gently give to the mayors is I personally would be inclined to remind the ministers and the premier that if they redirected some fossil fuel subsidies, direct and indirect, there's a whole bunch of money available, which might be better used for this. But I'll leave that to the mayor to decide. Happy to support this resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Pettengill. Thank you, Mr. Picketts, for this work and for drafting a letter. I think Councillor Anderson touched on something that's making a lot of municipalities nervous, which is maybe they have something up their sleeve. But if they do, they have not consulted with any local government about what that is. And so that's something that makes us all nervous. So happy to send this letter on behalf of the district, and encourage, what I might add to the letter is encouraging them to reach out and talk to us about what it is they want to replace it with and get feedback. So thanks for that. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Council, we're now on to item 11. It's our consent agenda. If there's any minutes, letters you wish to pull, now is the time to do that. Or if you're in conflict with anything that is in the consent agenda. Councillor Pettengill?
Wanted to pull letter 9.
Letter 9. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay, so with letter 9 pulled, someone to move the consent agenda. That remains moved by Councillor Hertford, seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll deal with that letter, Councillor Pettengill, after correspondence, item 13. Then we have no late agenda items. So we're on to item 13, correspondence for action. We have a letter from Spark BC to be referred to communication staff. This is about Access Awareness Day. Moved by Councillor Stoner. I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a letter from C. McCardle with regard to Brennan Park, and that this be referred to the budget 2022 discussions. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Carries. A letter from S. Harney, Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC, regarding childcare in Squamish, that this be referred to staff. This is an excellent letter with some great suggestions, so appreciate them paying attention to what we're doing. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hertford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Pettengill, do you want to speak to letter 9?
Yes, thank you. And just, I know we don't want to get into the camping bylaw discussions again, but one of the comments at the end was that for people, an opportunity to make some positive change would be to reach out and write letters to the provincial ministers asking for more affordable housing supports. And Ms. Bloom did that, and a few other people did that as well and CC'd us. I want to call out Ms. Bloom, though, because she published her letter on some of the social media sites, and I commented during the discussion that some of the dialogue made me very uncomfortable. But I did notice that Ms. Bloom was very active in bringing an informed opinion and really trying to build understanding. And I think, I see our library as a whole, and Ms. Bloom, by the way, is the Director of Library Services for the District of Squamish. And the library is on the forefront of building an informed and inclusive community. And I saw that lived out through Ms. Bloom over the last few weeks during this difficult camping bylaw discussion. So I just wanted to highlight the work that she has done and continues to do. I think it sort of represents some of the best of what we'd like to see in our community. So I'd like to thank Ms. Bloom for that.
I think it's important to clarify here as well that Ms. Bloom is writing as a private citizen and not as the director of the library, and that distinction needs to be held very clearly. We do enable our staff and to express their opinions in the public. So I just want to make sure, Councillor Pettingill, that you're not blending her roles there.
No, sorry, I didn't intend to do that. I think it just maybe speaks to the quality of people we have working with us, and it's just very impressive all around.
Thank you. So you're moving receipt of her letter?
Yes, please.
I'll second that, or I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're on to item 14, approval of minutes. We have recommendations from Committee of the Whole from May 25th. That council refer the Brennan Park Field and Land Master Plan back to staff for consideration of council comments from the May 25th Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Townless Fire Hall number 2, that we advance a design for the Townless Fire Hall, including bulking of the ground floor to enable the future ability to build additional floors for affordable housing. Councillor Graves?
I did just want to mention, I think that discussion, I was going to suggest when we pass this motion is to add the words or other uses to the end of the last sentence, because the discussion went around the possibility of affordable housing, but there are also commercial possibilities, district uses, etc. So it's just not just affordable housing, but the potential for other uses as well. So my suggestion is, and I'll move it, that the motion be as written with the addition of the words or other uses at the end.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? We have one advisory design panel set of minutes to receive. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have nothing to report on tonight? Okay. Anybody online for open question period?
I thought this was the only time.
Yeah. Council staff would like us to stick around for one more quick screen capture after the meeting. Our first photo was not good enough. Okay, councillor staff announcements. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. On Saturday, I'm sure it was impossible to move around town without noticing, but there was a very touching memorial for the loss of the Ross family, and in the form of a truck rally unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere, let alone in Squamish. And it was great to see the, obviously under very tragic circumstances, it was great to see it as a sort of a galvanizing point in our community. In Brackendale, we had, I know the streets were lined where I was, and people were coming from all over to come out and pay their respects, and perhaps to mourn losses of their own that we've been suffered through this COVID-19 crisis. So my condolences to the Ross family for their losses, and much respect for everyone who participated in the memorial, not only organizing or driving, but also coming out as a community and coming together and paying their respect. So it's a day that won't won't soon be forgotten. So
Yeah, it was a beautiful tribute. Thank you for mentioning that. Anyone else? Councillor Stoner and then Councillor Pettingill.
Agree, it was an amazing tribute on Saturday. Thanks, Councillor Herford, for speaking to it. I did also just want to flag that this week is Go by Bike Week. I did not have time to challenge my fellow councillors to ride your bikes as much as possible before the sign up date started on Monday, but it's not too late to get on your bikes, both council staff and our community, whether it's for recreation purposes, commuting, or just going to run some errands. The weather is fantastic, so get on your bikes and log. You can register at gobybike.ca and register your rides, and there's lots of really amazing prizes from the business community here in Squamish as well, which you can be eligible to win. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill.
Want to thank Councillor Stoner. I actually did ride our e-bike to the council meeting today and ran into a little bear on the way home. I didn't quite hit him, but it was quite a surprise. I think I might need to get my eyes checked because it's very late in the encounter when I realized it was a bear. But what what I wanted to speak to a couple of weeks ago, I think it was after our last meeting where we had a chance to speak, we had a staff presentation on densifying Squamish. It was an excellent presentation. I learned a lot. It has me really excited actually about some of the development and the ways we're developing things and what we can continue to do. I think this is a big topic in our community, and I would highly encourage people to watch for these sorts of events. They are just incredibly worthwhile, great discussion, great information, and I want to thank staff for putting that on. And then somewhat related to that, Diane Gunstone from United Way is hosting Jane Walks from June 12th to 19th. You can register at squamish.eventbrite.ca. And its movement started in memory of, I believe, Jane Jacobs, who's sort of a visionary in terms of city design. And the aim is to get us out sort of as we come back after COVID. These are self-guided tours, but it'll help us connect with our community, with our downtown, and start getting out and learning about all those things that we maybe didn't know. And I think in terms of thinking about what's possible for our future, this seems like a really great idea, and I'm quite excited about that. So check that out, June 12th to 19th.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill. I'm going to look ahead to June 8th is World Oceans Day, and there is a student presentation that morning. There's a couple of great online lectures that evening about Captain Pass Sound, through the week. And if you want more details, it's at LumarForChange.com, and the 4 is in number 4. Lumar for Change. And I get to open up the presentation to the classrooms on Tuesday morning, which I'm really excited about. And they've done an art contest for students around what house sound means to them. And I got a sneak peek at some of the submissions. And I don't know how the judges are going to make a determination. They're amazing. They're going to pick one from each grade. And those will be announced on Tuesday, so I'm looking forward to that. And then on June 9th in the evening, Squamish Can is hosting a panel discussion, which I'll be a part of, about electric vehicles in the Sea to Sky corridor. And so you can check out the details on their Facebook page. But looking forward to that. And then I am involved in both Howe Sound Secondary School commencement ceremonies next week, divided into 2, so Thursday evening and Friday evening. I have 3 wonderful minutes to address the graduates of 2021. So congratulations to all those graduates. And there is, I got the details this evening. Hold on. There is a parade for the graduates. Here we go. The grad class prom parade for Howe Sound Secondary is Saturday, June 12th, 3:30 p.m. The car parade will move from Howe Sound Secondary School, traveling north along Buckley Avenue, Queensway, Government Road to John Ross Middle School. Please come out and cheer on this year's graduating class. There you go. So with that, motion to terminate by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? And council, don't go away. We need our picture taken again. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the staff who supported and presented tonight, and thank you to the community.